Three police forces in England and Northern Ireland have been appealing for help to identify people involved in the violent disorder and riots over recent days.
Our reporter Leanne Brown has been looking at images released by Humberside Police. This in relation to incidents in Hull.
The faces of the men Humberside Police want to speak to, and many of them caught on our footage too. This man seen in a beige hat and wearing glasses. He's seen standing in front of police in Queen Victoria Square. This man with tattoos on his arm and wearing a black t-shirt. We see him twice in our footage, once on King Edward Street at the police line, and then again in the Springbank area where violence erupted. A man with a grey hooded top and a rucksack was also spotted in that area. In this footage shared on social media, he appears to be amongst a mob of people attacking a car and opening the door. Police have confirmed that no one was hurt here. In this image, a man with a black flat cap and scarf looks like he's about to throw an object. We saw him hanging around Jamieson Street while shops were being looted. And there are warnings it's not just those at the scene that are wanted by police. This man with a grey jumper around his neck was seen by us outside the Royal Hotel. He's got his hands on a police shield and is being cheered on to throw bottles. A distinctive white and orange hat makes this man easy to spot. We saw him wandering the streets and kicking a car. Anyone who recognises any of the 13 men can contact police. Leanne Brown, BBC News.
We're joined now by the Cabinet Office Minister, Nick Thomas-Symonds. Nick Thomas-Symonds, thank you very much for your time with us here on BBC Breakfast. Those pictures, even when you watch them and you think they were a few days ago, they're chilling. How confident are you that we won't see incidents like that happen again, in the coming days?
Well, firstly, Niagara, it's good to join you. I couldn't see those images then, but I'm sure I understand what you are referring to. And just to say that the images that we've all seen over recent days and back to last week on our streets have been absolutely appalling. And my message today is that the government goes into this weekend still in a state of high readiness to keep communities safe. I think we've already shown that the criminal justice system will deal with these violent thugs quickly. We've seen prison sentences handed down within days of up to 3 years. So there are people who are seeing the consequences of their behaviour by sitting in a prison cell because of what they've done, and it's important to send that message out. But secondly, the government is now deploying thousands of specialist police officers up and down the country. That will continue. The Prime Minister chaired a COBRA meeting last night in which he indicated that we go into the weekend prepared to do everything we can to keep people safe, and that's exactly what we will do.
OK, so you're prepared for it, but are you expecting... so on Wednesday, we knew more than 160 demonstrations were planned. I think 36 ended up taking place. Is there information? I'm not asking you to reveal the information if it's confidential or security sensitive, but is there information coming through that says there are more planned?
Well, look, we've all seen various information, and in some cases misinformation, frankly, that's been going around online. Of course, I'm not going to comment, as I'm sure you wouldn't expect me to, on intelligence, but what I would say is that as we go into the weekend, we are prepared for different eventualities. We have those specialist officers available. And in addition to that, I should say as well, I was in Bristol myself yesterday talking to communities that have been affected and talking to them about their concerns, their anxieties, their fears going forward. I was talking to Muslim community leaders there. The government does have a specific fund available for the security of mosques. And if there are people with concerns that would like additional security, then the government stands ready to help. That is the case anyway, but it's particularly the case at the moment.
Can you keep Muslim communities safe?
We will do everything we can to keep them safe. I delivered that message personally yesterday when I was out in Bristol talking to them. I had walk around Bristol, understanding exactly from them what their anxieties were. Look, in our country, we will keep everybody safe. That is absolutely what this government will do. The safety of our citizens is the first priority of any government. It is our top priority. We've been showing with the robust action.
I understand that. I do understand that. And I apologise for interrupting, but the fact is there are still people who are not satisfied with government policy, particularly when it comes to immigration in this country. And that dissatisfaction isn't going away. And they have the right to protest as well. How is that discontent going to be tackled to avoid this division that we're seeing, where you see communities feeling unsafe?
But there's a distinction there, isn't there? Because I spoke to people in the general election up and down the country, and indeed in months and years before that, who were expressing concerns to me about the level of migration. But they are decent, law-abiding British people. They weren't the type of people who were going to go out and engage in thuggish, violent behaviour on our streets. And I think it's really important that we are clear about that. Someone who turns up on our streets carrying a weapon is not going to protest about anything. They're going with criminal intent on thuggish behaviour. And let's be absolutely clear about that distinction. On people's legitimate concerns about migration, that was coming up on the doorsteps. That was coming up with people expressing their views in a perfectly reasonable way in the election to candidates and indeed to their members of parliament before that. And with regard to the levels of migration, this government has said that we believe the level of net migration needs to come down. That's regular migration. And then, of course, in terms of the people in small boats coming across the channel, we've already started the work of setting up our border security command to bring together the different agencies to start busting the criminal smuggler gangs. That work is going on responding to legitimate concerns, but that's very different from the thugs that we're seeing on our streets.
Some will say that the reason there was a relative peace over the last couple of days is because of the counter-protests. Now, those counter-protesters went out against advice, really, and gathered. Were they right? And were the other protesters, the non-violent ones, if those can be spotted, were the others wrong?
Look, there is a fine tradition of protest in this country, and people going out and lawfully protesting, without breaking the law, obviously, is a matter for them. But as I've said and the Home Secretary has said, what we're not going to do as politicians, we've seen the police, we've seen the strain the police are under, the tremendous effort that they are putting in. We're not going to go as politicians and start encouraging even more people onto our streets. But again, there's a distinction here, isn't there, between our tradition of peaceful protests. We've seen many peaceful protests up and down the country over the years, very much part of our politics. That's very different from people who engage in thuggish, violent behaviour on our streets and just frankly go out on the streets, not to protest about anything in particular, but because they're intent on committing crime, and that's very different.
Can you give me your reaction to the Labour councillor who has been arrested? He was at a counter-protest, at one of those counter-protests in Walthamstow, saying that far-right demonstrators needed to have their throats cut.
Well, he was immediately suspended from the Labour Party. In terms of the criminal proceedings, I understand the individual has now been arrested. So obviously I'm not going to comment on the proceedings whilst they're ongoing until they've reached their conclusion. But moving away from the individual case, whoever you are, if you are engaging in violent behaviour on our streets or threatening behaviour, or indeed if you're engaging in threatening and inciting behaviour online, the police will be coming for you, and you should be expected to be treated very quickly by our criminal justice system, whoever you are.
Nick Thomas-Symonds, thank you very much. Government Minister, thank you very much for joining us here on BBC Breakfast.